The goal of enrichment is for the animals in our care to be physically, behaviorally, and emotionally healthy so that they can express their natural, called species typical, behaviors. For our animals to be physically, behaviorally, and emotionally healthy, and therefore, in order for them to be able to express species typical behaviors, we have to meet their needs. In order to meet their needs, we need to be able to understand what their needs are and then identify what needs of theirs are already being met and which ones are not currently being met. And then we have to meet the unmet needs. But that's not the end of it. We then must observe whether or not our attempts at meeting their unmet needs were effective. One of the criteria we use to determine how well we've met those needs is that we're seeing observable behavior change in the direction we're wanting it to go. Another criterion we use to determine whether their needs have been met is observing whether or not they are choosing to engage with the resources we have provided. The ability to make choices and have some measure of control over our outcomes is called agency. If our attempts weren't successful, if the animal didn't choose to engage and or behaviors aren't changing in the direction we want, we need to reassess, readdress, and try again. So now that we've talked about what enrichment is, let's talk a little about what it isn't. Toys and games aren't enrichment. Objects and activities certainly have the potential to be enriching, but they are not in and of themselves enrichment. The only way to determine whether any of those things is enriching is if we were using them to meet a specific need, and then we observe that the animal chooses to engage with them, and the act of engaging with them achieves our intended goal. In other words, enrichment isn't the thing itself, but the contingent relationship between the thing and the outcome. Training isn't enrichment. Like objects and activities, training absolutely has the potential to be enriching. But again, we can only determine if training is in fact enrichment by first assessing whether the learner chooses to engage, and second, assessing whether training achieved our intended goal. Did that training effort result in an animal that is more physically, behaviorally, and emotionally healthy than they were before? Do they, as a result of that training, now have the opportunity and ability to perform species-typical behaviors in healthy, safe, and appropriate ways? If the answer is no, then that particular training wasn't enrichment. Enrichment isn't just a synonym for reinforcement. There has been some confusion within the animal training community as to whether or not enrichment is just reinforcement. We understand why this confusion exists. Since both concepts involve behavior change, there is certainly a lot of overlap between the two concepts. They are both defined as contingencies, for example, and a lot of reinforcement does happen in enrichment. However, they are not necessarily interchangeable. Reinforcement can be defined as the contingent relationship between a behavior and the following consequence, wherein that consequence increases the future probability of that behavior. It's a little more complicated than that, but for our purposes, we'll go with this definition. Reinforcement is defined by that specific contingency. Behavior happens, then consequence happens, then behavior is more likely to happen in the future when that consequence is likely to follow. During enrichment, we are setting the stage for a wide variety of behaviors to occur, and as the result of a variety of factors. For example, let's say we give a dog a Kong with the goal of providing foraging and mental stimulation.